let's talk about that confusing timeline. Hey guys, before you get started, make sure you click that subscribe button, and if you don't ring that bell, you won't get any updates. So, Avengers Endgame is over, and as we expected, the Avengers basically used time travel to undo Thanos' snap herd around the universe. Now, how this came together played out quite differently than many fans had theorized, but the end results were the same. The Mad Titan was defeated, and everyone who was dusted in the Decimation is returned, although after 5 years in limbo. Now, for many, time travel in the MCU was super confusing, and no, we're not going to start explaining how a Mobius strip works here and in the other scientific terms. And, you know why? Well, it seems like the filmmakers purposely avoided fully explaining it in the film, and leaned more towards how it doesn't work. I actually think the purposefulness of this indicates some future plotline we're unaware of, but let's continue. So what can we clearly say about time travel in Endgame? Well, it's clear now, as the Hulk pointed out, changing the past does not change the future. But beyond that, it seems despite the team's best effort, multiple new timelines were formed. And we're not just talking about 1 or 2, maybe 20 or more. So let's sit down for a minute, talk about that, and see what we have. Now, off to the whiteboard. First, let's draw out the MCU timeline, at least as we know it. Starting from the known past and taking us into Phase 4. Then let's break the timeline down into a couple sections where we know some of our time travelers may have landed. There we go. Now our first time traveler in the movie, Clint Barton, went back to 2017, and that's where his new divergent timeline would start. Yes, even removing the glove technically would create another timeline. Then there's Captain America, who not only exists in the primary timeline, but actually created a second alternative timeline when he went back in time and stayed with Peggy Carter. This is the old man we see return and hand the shield over to Sam Wilson. And then there's the 2012 timeline, Loki and several stones. Now, no matter what, we get a divergent timeline because Loki escaped. But there's also other potential timelines that are created here by removing each of the stones, adding at least 3 more potential timelines to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not to mention all the other interaction multiple Avengers had with people in 2012, all potentially creating additional timelines. Then there's the jump back to the 1970s with Steve and Tony. Now we know there's at least 2 divergent timelines here, one when the stones removed and one when the stones returned, but there's also potentially several others, including Tony's interaction with Howard Stark and Hank Pym's Pym particles being removed from his lab. Both could alter greatly the MCU timeline leading forward from that point. Then we see Thor and Rocket head to Asgard. Now again, we have 2 divergent timelines, one when the stone is removed and one when the stone is put back, but let's not forget all the other interaction, Thor removing the hammer, and all the interaction with his mother, not to mention the rogue raccoon running around the halls of Asgard being put on Odin's Most Wanted list. All of these also potentially creating additional timelines. Then there's the Thanos crew from 2014, creating one of the biggest multiple timeline issues that there is. Not only do we have several characters that are removed from the timeline and eventually killed, we also have the stones removed from the timeline and returned. Not to mention all the interactions with multiple characters such as War Machine knocking Star-Lord out, all creating more timelines. This time frame creates one of the most serious infractions and could possibly create dozens of timelines all on its own. The butterfly effect is a bitch. Then finally, the Soul Stone and the Stone Keeper. This must have been pretty interesting seeing Steve Rogers return the stone to the Red Skull. This initially creates 2 alternate timelines, but then eventually in 2018 it'll create a third. Thanos and Gamora will never show up to pick up that stone, and therefore it will remain there waiting for someone to eventually retrieve it. So where does this leave us? Outside of the dozen or so timelines we've illustrated here, there's at least twice as many lingering. So what does Marvel do with 2 or 3 dozen alternate timelines? Well, to me, that's an awfully easy question to answer. The Russo brothers have said on more than one occasion they would only return for one thing: Secret Wars. Also, remember, Feige said we wouldn't necessarily be in the same kind of phases anymore. Bringing the Russo brothers back in 5 or 6 years to do Secret Wars really may be the only way for Marvel to ever potentially top Endgame. But over the course of the next 15 or so movies, it's pretty clear they'll just lay out that there are multiple timelines with multiple histories of the Marvel Universe, and then bring them all together in a version of Secret Wars probably based on the 2015 run. By this point, we could establish a history for all the Fox characters, including the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, as well as all these new characters that'll be joining the Marvel Universe in Phase 4. Additionally, it makes it really easy to bring back any character who has died or is currently taking a break. Cough, cough, Chris Evans. So what do you guys think? Do you think these alternate timelines are going to be the future of the MCU? These things aren't being done for no reason. And Kevin Feige is like a Cylon. He always has a plan. Tell me what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, make sure you press like below, click subscribe, and if you don't ring that bell, you won't get any updates. Peace.